Hi everyone, it's Gina K from Gina K Designs, and I'm so excited to be here on the Simon Says Stamp blog and YouTube channel celebrating STAMPtember. Our collaboration set with Simon Says Stamp is called Joy of the Season, and it's filled with all of these beautiful bold images and greetings like Merry Christmas, Feel the Joy of the Season, Season's Greetings, and Kindness is like snow, it beautifies everything it touches. There's also some greetings built into some of the other images, and this stamp set is going to be a must-have. Now I'm going to show you a couple of different projects today, and I'm going to teach you a technique that I call faux vellum. I'm going to start with a piece of square cardstock, and this cardstock measures 3 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And then I'm going to use some purple tape. Now I'm going to tear this purple tape just a little bit larger than my piece of cardstock. And I'm going to tear the one side down. And as I tear, I'm going to kind of shift my hand to the right a little bit and then to the left. I'm just pulling it to the right and the left. And that's going to create hills and valleys along the edge of this purple tape. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You can see I'm pulling to the left and then to the right a little bit. And I just want to make sure that the purple tape that's left behind is big enough to fit my greeting. Now I'm going to tape this onto my shirt 2 times. I'm going to tape it on, peel it off, tape it on, and peel it off again. And that's going to remove any of the tackiness of this tape. I just want it to be enough to cover. So I'm placing this where I want my greeting panel to be and where I want it to appear as an open space, and then I'm taping that down, pressing down nice and hard on that tape to keep everything in place. I'm going to start by sponging a background using some sea glass ink and a sponge dauber. And I'm going to kind of go on an angle here, blending this ink from the top right-hand corner down toward the left bottom-hand corner. And I'm just blending and blending and just spreading that ink around. Now the next color I'm going to use is a complementary color. It's jelly bean green. So when I blend jelly bean green into the sea glass, I get a new shade of blue-green. So first you're going to see the jelly bean green, and then I'm going to blend over the sea glass, and some of that sea glass is going to turn bluish green when I blend the two colors together. And now I'm going to add a third color into the mix, and this is the lovely lavender. And I'm going to ink this up with a sponge dauber as well and add sponging along the blue. Now you want to be careful when you're blending ink colors that you blend complementary colors and not colors that are going to turn brown when they're blended together. The purple and the blue just make a bluish purple, and the green and the blue make a blue-green, but that purple and green will not work together. So now I'm going to add a little bit more sea glass to this next corner, and I'm going to continue to blend into that lovely lavender. And my final color will be some jelly bean green. And then once I have that down, I'm going to go back with the sea glass again and just add a little bit more sea glass in there. Now I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to wipe off the purple tape, and then I'm going to wipe over the entire surface. I want to remove any of the wet ink, and I also want to remove it from that purple tape. Now I just want to reposition my piece of cardstock here on my mat, and now I'm going to use an embossing magic pad because I'm going to do some embossing. This is just going to remove static. It's going to dry up any of that ink that's still wet and remove any oil that might have gotten on the cardstock from my skin. Now I'm going to use the large snowflake from the Joy of the Season stamp set. I just love this snowflake. And all of these stamps contain have matching dies, which I think is really fun because you can cut these snowflakes out and pop them up. You can cut out a lot of the other images. So there is a coordinating die set for this stamp set. So you can see, even though you shouldn't really rock a stamp, I'm rocking it a little bit because I want to make sure that that Versamark gets onto the cardstock right near that purple tape. that purple tape is raised up a little bit, so I have to press down exceptionally hard around that area to make sure that I get good coverage right up to the line. So now I'm just doing the corners. And the next thing that I'm going to stamp is I'm going to stamp right over that purple tape. So half the snowflake's going to be on top and half is going to be on the bottom. So when I do that, I definitely want to rock toward the top and then rock toward the bottom a little bit, just to make sure that I have a good impression along the edge of that tape. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to stamp it on top of the purple tape, and then I'm going to rock it toward the top and then down back toward the bottom a little bit. Then I'm just going to use the edge of the stamp and fill in some of the little areas that could use a little bit more stamping. So one at the bottom, and then I'm going to stamp one on each corner of the bottom, just a tiny little bit. Now it's very hard to see the Versamark, so you may get a little overlapping, and if you do, that's perfectly fine because snowflakes, when the snow is falling, overlap. So that will still look really pretty. Now I'm going to lift this up, and I'm going to take some white embossing powder, and I'm going to sprinkle that all over my stamped snowflakes. And the Versamark is going to grab all of that embossing powder. The embossing powder that I'm using is the Gina K Designs Fine Detail White Embossing Powder. So now that I have that done, the next step you have to be a little careful with. I'm going to remove the purple tape. So I'm just going to start at one end and just put my finger somewhere where there isn't embossing powder and just start it. Then I can move my finger down to that open space, and that purple tape's on there tight, but as you can see, it's not tearing the paper. So now I have this piece of white strip there that almost looks like cardstock, and it's time to emboss the snowflakes. Now when I emboss, I always like to heat my gun up, my embossing gun, just a little bit first. The reason I do that is because it helps the embossing powder melt more quickly if the heat gun is already hot. And when you have to spend less time heating your embossing powder, you'll get less warping on your cardstock. Usually I hold my cardstock with a wooden clothespin. But I forgot my wooden clothespin, and so I am just holding onto it with my fingers. So I'm going to have to actually turn it here and then finish up the embossing because it was getting a little too close to my fingers. And so once all of that is complete, you can see I have these beautiful snowflakes, this open space, and then more snowflakes at the bottom. So I've already mounted this onto a piece of black cardstock, and that just keeps everything nice and flat. Now I'm going to tuck that into the corner of my MISTI and add my magnet to keep it down. Then I'm going to pick one of the greetings, and the greeting that I picked is one of my favorites from the set, and it's the one that says, "Kindness is like snow. It beautifies everything it touches." And I'm going to pick that up with the door of the MISTI and then ink it up with some black ONYX ink. And then I'm going to stamp it. And I want to make sure my magnet is pretty far down just to hold that cardstock in place in case I want to stamp it a second time. But it looks like a great impression, and so that is what that looks like up close. Now here is a finished card, and the only difference is I mounted that panel onto a craft card base, and this is the perfect size for a gift card or for attaching to a gift. Now for my next card project, I'm going to take some more purple tape, and I'm going to do the same technique that I did initially with the first one, where I'm tearing it by pulling it to the left and the right a little bit to create those hills and valleys. And again, I'm using the same size cardstock, a 3 3/4 inch by 3 3/4 inch square. So once I have this all torn the way I want it, I'm going to do a little bit of a different technique this time, and this is going to appear more like vellum. That first one looked a little bit more like torn cardstock. This is going to look more like vellum. So again, I'm going to take this purple tape and I'm going to tape it to my shirt once, and then I'm going to tape it to my shirt again, just to remove most of the tackiness so that I can really press down hard and secure it on the sides. And I'm going to tape it more toward the middle of the piece of cardstock. Then I want to butt that up against the 5-inch mark on my MISTI and then press all of that down. Now that purple tape is going to hold it in place, so I'm not going to use my magnet for this. I'm going to position this beautiful tree stamp. I just love this stamp. This stamp can be used for so many things. You can use it with your snowman stamps and your cute little critters, and it's a beautiful large stamp, perfect for a background. So now I'm going to stamp this one. I'm going to ink it up in some jelly bean green first, and you can see I'm using the larger Gina K Designs ink pad for this. I like to use the larger pads for my background stamps. However, you certainly can use the ink cube if that's what you have. Now I'm going to add some more colors to these trees. The second color is Fresh Asparagus. I'm going to pick that color up using my sponge dauber, and I'm going to pat that all over those trees. Once that's done, I'm going to come back in with a third color. The color I'm using this time is Christmas Pine, and I'm going to ink up my sponge dauber with that and then tap a little bit of that onto the trees as well. So this has a mixture of 3 different greens that work really well together to create a beautiful tree line. This is similar to the thumping technique, except you're not using markers, you're using sponge daubers. Now I'm going to ink that up and I'm going to press pretty hard on it because I really want that stamp to make contact with the paper as close to the edge of the purple tape as possible. Now my next step is going to be to remove the purple tape, and I'm not cleaning off my stamp yet. So I'm going to remove that purple tape, and then I'm going to position that piece of cardstock back at that 5-inch mark. And then I am going to slip the magnet way close to the top. Then I'm going to use a scrap piece of paper and I'm going to stamp that stamp off one time. And then I'm going to stamp it again right onto my card project. And that's going to give me a lighter version. So that's going to make it look more like vellum. Now it looks like there's something, a film of something over that area because you can still see the stamped image behind it. So now I'm cleaning the purple tape with my tidy towel, and you can clean this purple tape and use it over and over again until it completely loses all of its stickiness. So you don't have to cut a new piece of purple tape every time you want to do this technique. You can make a couple of cards before you need a new piece. And now I'm placing that purple tape back on there, and then I'm going to use a little bit of the jelly bean green ink, and I'm going to just rub that gently right close to the line on the edge of the purple tape, just to define the lines a little bit more. So it's really not extending far past the purple tape, just a tiny little bit. And now I'm going to peel that purple tape off again. And you can take a look up close. Now that looks like there's a piece of vellum on top. Now I'm going to slip that panel down to the corner of my MISTI, and I'm going to pick my greeting. This time I'm going to choose the Merry Christmas greeting because this is going to be more of a traditional card. So I'm going to use that greeting, and I'm going to place it off to the right-hand side on my piece of faux vellum. Now, one thing you can do is you can slip another piece of scrap square in there to make sure that it's stamped straight first if you want, but I can see it pretty well even though it hasn't been inked up very much. I can see that it's straight. And now I'm going to use some black onyx ink on that and ink that stamp up real well, and then I'm going to stamp it onto my faux vellum strip. And this is what that looks like up close. And here's a finished card that I made by mounting it on a black piece of cardstock and then once again on a craft card base. And you can see that really looks like vellum in there, doesn't it? I love that. And once again, this card makes the perfect little gift card holder. So my next project is going to use a bigger piece of cardstock. I've cut this one to about 5 inches square, and I'm using a background stamp. And this background stamp is the Diagonal Stripe background stamp by Gina K Designs. And I'm going to take some purple tape and I'm going to cut that a little bit larger than this piece of cardstock. And once again, I'm going to do the same technique of tearing down the sides of the purple tape. Moving my hand left and right as I tear to create those hills and valleys. Purple tape is pretty easy to peel this way too. It wants to stay straight, so you have to kind of force it to move to the right and to the left, but it does make the perfect little strip this way. And again, I'm going to tape it onto my shirt once and then twice. And then I'm going to find the spot that I want to lay this purple tape down. And I'm going to remember while I'm laying this down that I'm going to be cutting some of the bottom of this off. So I'm going to tape it a little higher up than actually where it's going to end up at the bottom at the end of my project. So now I have that positioned at the 5.5 inch mark on my MISTI, and I am going to slip that in. I needed to take the foam pad out because I'm using a rubber stamp. I'm going to slip that into that 5.5 inch mark and tape that down using the purple tape. Now I'm going to lay the background stamp down, face down, onto my project, and I'm going to pick it up with the door of the MISTI. Now this isn't my favorite way to use a background stamp. I tend to like to lay the background stamp on its back and then put the cardstock on top, but you have to use it this way for this technique for accuracy. So I'm going to start to ink up this stamp using some sea glass ink. And again, I'm using a bigger stamp pad rather than the cube, which is fine. You can use the cube if you want. It certainly will work. If you haven't watched my daughter Rena's videos, she only has ink cubes and she manages to ink up entire background stamps with them. Now I'm going to rub my hand up and down the entire surface of this background stamp, and then I'm going to pay extra attention to where the purple tape is. So I'm going to rub horizontally along the edges of where that purple tape is under there, because I really want to transfer that ink close. Now I'm going to pick up this purple tape, and then I'm going to take a piece of scrap paper and slip it in there. And then I left the magnet on the first time and I had to pull the magnet out and redo it. So I'm just going to pull the magnet out here and I'm going to stamp this again. I'm stamping it off, and then I'm removing that scrap piece of paper, making sure that that cardstock's in the right position, that 5.5 mark, and then I'm going to stamp it again. And I'm going to get a lighter version, and the stripes are going to be continuous there. So now I'm going to clean my stamp with the tidy towel, and once that stamp is all cleaned up, I'm also going to wash the purple tape with the tidy towel. So I'm going to clean the inside here of my MISTI too, because that got ink all over it. And then I'm going to spread the purple tape out and clean that with the tidy towel. Now I'm going to position that cardstock back to that 5.5 inch mark, replace the purple tape, and you can see how easy it is to know when you're putting it on wrong. It'll match up perfectly with what's left behind, so you'll be able to reposition it again. And now I'm going to press that down, make sure it's nice and secure. And then I'm going to pick up the background stamp and I'm going to turn it a quarter turn from the way it was last time, just a quarter turn. And I'm going to pick that background stamp up again with the door of the MISTI. And now I'm going to use a complementary color. This is the Jelly Bean Green that blends so nicely with the sea glass. And I'm going to ink up the background stamp with Jelly Bean Green. Now, everywhere that this stamp is going to touch the sea glass is going to be a third color because they're going to blend together. So this is a really neat effect. So I'm going to once again rub my hand up and down every part of this background stamp, making sure I get a good transfer, and then once again horizontally along the purple tape. And you can see I have that fun plaid now. So again, I have to take the purple tape off, and I'm going to use a piece of cardstock, a scrap piece of cardstock in there. And then I'm going to stamp it off once. And then, once I've stamped it off, I'm going to remove the scrap piece of cardstock and stamp it again to complete my plaid in that faux vellum area. So now you can see it appears that there's vellum over top of that plaid. And I'm going to clean my purple tape with the tidy towel and reposition it one more time. And now I'm going to highlight around the edge of the purple tape using some jelly bean green ink and a sponge dauber. So I'm going to ink that up with the sponge dauber, and I'm going to really just rub that sponge dauber over the purple tape, letting it just creep outside of the purple tape just to hit the edge lightly. But it really makes a difference. It really defines the edge, and it almost appears a little bit like a shadow. So again, I'm going to peel the purple tape off, and you can see how much more vibrant that looks now that I've added that little bit of edging. Makes a big difference. It sure looks like vellum. Now I'm going to take my Tim Holtz stamp cutter, my Tim Holtz paper cutter, not stamp cutter, paper cutter, and I'm going to cut this just so a little bit of that bottom hangs out, and then I'm going to cut it at 3 3/4 inches along the top. Now on the side, I'm going to pick a spot to cut it, just anywhere, and then I'm going to turn it to 3 3/4 inches again. And so that gives me that perfect square, and that allowed me to use that big background stamp and get it right to the edge. So here's a finished card that I made using that panel. I stamped the season's greetings, and then I stamped the 2 little cups that say Holly and Jolly, and cut them out with the dies, and then popped them on with some foam squares. Well, I hope you enjoyed these projects today featuring the brand new STAMPtember set Joy of the Season. Now these sets are limited editions, so I encourage you to head over to simonsaysstamp.com and pick up your copy of Joy of the Season or the Joy of the Season bundle that includes all of the dies to cut out these images. Thank you so much for watching my STAMPtember video, and I hope I see you again here soon on the Simon Says Stamp blog.